What would you do if you were humiliated every day? If people judged you not for who you were, but for the color of your skin? What if you had a secret? One that could turn the tables in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Liam Carter, a young black man who moved to a new town, hoping for a fresh start, only to find himself the target of relentless bullying and racial discrimination. But what those bullies didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that Liam wasn't just another kid they could push around, because Liam Carter was a fighter. Not just any fighter, but one trained by the best. His father, a former world-class martial artist who had spent years preparing him for life's hardest battles. What started as just another case of bullying soon spiraled into something far bigger, a reckoning that no one saw coming. Fairview, Georgia, was the kind of town where some things never changed. The same people had lived there for generations, walking the same streets, attending the same churches, and most importantly, following the same unspoken rules. Outsiders weren't welcome, especially not those who didn't fit in. So when Liam Carter moved to Fairview with his mother, the whispers began before he even stepped foot in Ridgewood High. A black kid? In this town? Bet he won't last a month. The school itself was no different. Ridgewood High was controlled by an elite group of students who acted like they owned the place. Led by Derek Coleman, the football captain and son of the school's head coach. These boys weren't just bullies. They were gatekeepers, making sure certain people knew their place. And Liam, he was their next target. Liam had learned early in life that the best way to avoid trouble was to stay invisible. He didn't talk much, didn't try to make friends, and kept his head down. He dressed in simple, dark clothes, sat at the back of every classroom, and spoke only when necessary. But ironically, silence only made him stand out more. One afternoon, as Liam sat alone in the cafeteria eating in peace, Derek and his crew approached. "Hey, new guy," Derek sneered, slamming his hand down on the table loud enough to turn heads. "Didn't see you at tryouts. You planning to join a team? Or are you just another lazy?" He smirked. "Never mind, I already know the answer." The meaning was clear. Liam wasn't welcome here. Liam didn't react. He simply took another bite of his food, his face calm, his eyes locked on Derek without a trace of fear. That only made things worse. The bullies exchanged glances, expecting a reaction, but Liam gave them nothing. "Look at this," one of Derek's friends, Ryan Brooks, chuckled. "He's mute, or just a coward," another added, shaking his head in mock disappointment. Liam slowly placed his fork down, picked up his tray, and stood up. Without saying a word, he walked past them and left the cafeteria. The room fell silent. No yelling, no shoving, just silence. That should have been the end of it. But for Derek, it was only the beginning. He clenched his fists, his face burning with embarrassment. This guy thinks he can ignore us? His jaw tightened. That's not gonna fly. And just like that, Liam Carter's fate was sealed. It started with small things. A shoulder bump in the hallways, a mistaken shove that sent Liam's books crashing to the floor, sarcastic whispers whenever he walked by. But through it all, Liam never reacted. No anger, no fear, nothing. And that only made Derek and his crew more determined. Then came the first real confrontation. One afternoon as Liam left the school building, he found his path blocked. Derek stood in the center, arms crossed, with Ryan and two others at his side, smirking like they'd already won. "Hey, new guy," Derek said. "You're a hard man to get a reaction from, but don't worry, we'll change that." Liam didn't answer, he just stared, his expression unreadable, cold, calculated. Ryan chuckled. "Not much of a talker, huh? That's okay. We don't need words to have fun." Before Liam could step around them, Ryan shoved him, not hard enough to knock him down, just enough to test him. Liam staggered slightly, but quickly regained his balance. He didn't raise his fists, didn't even look angry, and that annoyed Derek more than anything. "What's wrong?" Derek taunted. "You scared? Or do you think you're too good to fight back?" Liam's eyes flickered with something dangerous, but it disappeared as quickly as it had come. Derek smirked. "That's what I thought, just another coward." Satisfied that they had put Liam in his place, they laughed and walked away. They had no idea that Liam hadn't reacted, not because he was afraid, but because he knew exactly what he was capable of. He had spent years training, honing his skills, perfecting techniques that could have ended that confrontation in seconds. But not yet. They weren't worth it. Not yet. The bullying didn't stop. It escalated. The shoulder bumps turned into intentional trips. The whispers turned into outright slurs. The stolen notebooks became defaced with racial insults. Liam still refused to react. But Derek and his crew, they weren't just looking to make his life miserable. They were looking for a fight, and soon enough, they were going to get one. But what they didn't realize was that by pushing Liam Carter too far, they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Ryan Brooks groaned as he pushed himself off the ground, cradling his wrist, his face twisted in shock. It had happened too fast, too smooth. Derek Coleman stood frozen, his smug expression replaced by something else, something unfamiliar. Unease. Liam Carter didn't look proud or triumphant. He didn't taunt them or smirk. He just stood there, calm, unreadable. And that made it worse. "You got lucky," Derek spat, masking the uncertainty in his voice. Liam tilted his head slightly. "You think so?" His voice was steady, his tone unwavering. Derek clenched his jaw. "This isn't over." Liam gave him a single nod. "It never is." With that, he turned and walked away. And as Derek watched him go, his hands curled into fists. He had to get even, because this wasn't just about respect anymore. This was about putting Liam in his place. By the next morning, Ridgewood High was buzzing. Everyone had heard about what happened. Ryan Brooks, one of the biggest, meanest guys in school, had been put on the ground in seconds. People whispered about it in the halls, exchanging glances as Liam walked past. "Did you hear? He didn't even break a sweat. I thought Derek and his boys ran this school." Derek could feel the shift in the air. It was slipping. And Liam, he just kept moving like nothing had happened. And that was a problem. Mr. Harrison, Ridgewood High's history teacher, had been there long enough to recognize the signs. He knew Derek's group, knew what they were capable of, and he knew when something had changed. That afternoon, he found Liam in the Ridgewood Academic Center, sitting alone, flipping through a book on military strategy. "Mind if I join you?" Harrison asked, pulling out a chair. Liam looked up, his expression cautious. "Depends on what you want." Harrison smiled slightly. "Just a conversation." Liam hesitated, then nodded. Harrison studied him. The way he sat, upright, aware. The way he moved, controlled, disciplined. "I heard about what happened yesterday," he said carefully. Liam didn't react. He didn't confirm or deny. He just waited. Harrison leaned forward. "Most kids wouldn't have been able to do what you did. You handled yourself well. Too well." A flicker of something passed through Liam's eyes. "Where did you learn that?" Harrison pressed. For a moment, Liam was silent. Then in a low voice, he said, "My father trained me." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Trained you?" Liam nodded. "He was a professional fighter, taught me everything he knew." And suddenly it all made sense. The stance, the awareness, the terrifying precision. Liam Carter wasn't just some kid who got lucky. He was a trained fighter. Harrison exhaled slowly. "Listen, Liam, I know Derek and his friends won't let this go. You need to be careful. This isn't just about schoolyard bullying anymore." Liam met his gaze, his expression unreadable. "I know." But what neither of them realized was that Derek had been listening outside the library door. And now he knew Liam's secret. Derek was furious. Liam had humiliated them. And worse, he was dangerous. He wasn't just some nobody they could shove around. He was a fighter. That night, Derek met with a group of older guys, his brother's friends, the ones who had already graduated but still saw Ridgewood as their territory. Guys like Jake Hollister, who never let go of the past. Guys who didn't take kindly to people like Liam stepping out of line. "Kid thinks he's tough?" Jake scoffed. "Thinks he can put his hands on you and walk away?" Derek smirked. "Not for long." The plan was simple. Make an example out of Liam. The next afternoon, word spread. There was going to be a fight behind the gym. And this time, Liam wasn't walking away. By the time school ended, the crowd had gathered. Behind the Ridgewood parking lot, students formed a circle, their voices buzzing with anticipation. Derek stood in the center, flanked by 5 others, and these weren't just high school kids. These were grown men. "Glad you showed up," Derek sneered, cracking his knuckles. Liam sighed. Didn't come here to fight. Derek scoffed. Too bad, because you don't have a choice. One of the older guys lunged, but Liam moved first. A blur of motion, a strike to the ribs, a sweep of the legs, a body hitting the pavement. The crowd gasped. Another came at him. A sharp elbow to the jaw, out cold. 2 down. The other 3 hesitated. Liam took a slow breath, his eyes locked on Derek. Still think you run this place? Derek's face twisted in rage. But before he could make a move, a voice boomed through the air. Enough, Mr. Harrison. He stood there, eyes burning with authority. Behind him, the principal. And just like that, the moment was gone. Derek and his crew weren't untouchable anymore. And as Liam walked away, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The silence in Ridgewood High the next morning was unnatural. No Derek Coleman, no Ryan Brooks. None of the usual sneers or racial slurs whispered in the hallways. For the first time in years, the school felt different. Students who had once kept their heads down now walked with a newfound confidence. Nobody was getting shoved into lockers. Nobody was getting tripped. And it was all because of Liam Carter. But Liam didn't care about any of that. He hadn't come here to be a hero. So when he walked into the Ridgewood Academic Center that afternoon, he was surprised to see Mr. Harrison waiting for him. The teacher gave him a knowing smile. Heard you made quite an impression yesterday. Liam shrugged. Did what I had to do. Harrison nodded, studying him. You know, I looked up your father. Liam tensed. His grip on the book in his hand tightened. Harrison leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Your father, Darius Carter, was a legend, undefeated in his prime. Liam remained silent, his jaw clenched. But then, suddenly, he disappeared from the fighting world. Harrison's voice lowered. No one knew why. Liam looked away, because he saw what it was becoming. Harrison frowned. Liam exhaled, forcing himself to meet the teacher's gaze. Fighting wasn't about honor anymore. It wasn't about discipline. It was about destruction, about entertainment, about giving people a show. Harrison studied him carefully. And what about you? Do you fight for destruction? Liam's response was immediate. I fight to end fights before they start. Harrison nodded slowly as if the answer was exactly what he expected. But before he could say anything else, the door to the library creaked open. Liam's senses sharpened instantly, and when he turned, he saw her. Rachel Whitmore. Rachel wasn't just any student, she was one of them. Not part of Derek's gang, but close enough to them that her showing up here now was suspicious. She hesitated at the door before stepping inside, glancing toward Mr. Harrison. Can I talk to Liam? Harrison raised an eyebrow but nodded. I'll be around. He gave Liam a small nod before walking away. Rachel crossed her arms, shifting her weight from foot to foot. You really don't care, do you? Liam didn't answer. Rachel sighed. You humiliated Derek in front of everyone. You think that's just going to go away? Liam exhaled. If he's smart, he'll let it. Rachel shook her head. You don't get it, Carter. This isn't just about the fight. You made him look weak. She hesitated before lowering her voice. And weak men in this town don't stay down. They come back angrier, meaner, and they bring others with them. Liam remained still, but something dark flickered behind his eyes. Let them come. Rachel scoffed. You really think you can take on all of them? Liam tilted his head slightly. I don't think, I know. Rachel swallowed, looking around before stepping closer. Listen, I'm telling you this because Derek's not just planning another fight. Liam's fingers tightened into a fist beneath the table. What's he planning? Rachel hesitated. Then finally she muttered, something worse. That night, Liam left school later than usual. The halls were mostly empty, and by the time he stepped outside, the campus was nearly silent. Too silent. Then from the shadows, footsteps. Liam's muscles coiled like a spring. Hey there, Carter. Derek Coleman stepped out from behind the bleachers, hands shoved in his pockets. His lip curled into a sneer. And he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 4 more men, not high schoolers, grown men. Liam recognized one of them immediately, Jake Hollister, Derek's older brother. Hollister cracked his knuckles. You made my little brother look real bad, kid. Liam's eyes flickered to Derek, then back to his brother. I didn't make him look bad. He did that himself. Derek's nostrils flared. You don't belong here, Carter. You never did. Liam sighed, rolling his shoulders. You dragged 4 guys out here to tell me that? Hollister chuckled darkly. Nah, we're here to remind you of something. Liam's heartbeat remained steady because he had seen this before. He had felt this before, a moment before a fight, when everything became still. Then, movement. Hollister lunged first, throwing a wild punch, but Liam ducked. His elbow shot forward, straight into the man's ribs. Hollister stumbled back, wheezing. Then the next man came at him. Liam spun, one sharp kick to the knee, then another to the jaw. He hit the ground. Hard. 2 down. The third grabbed Liam from behind. A mistake. Liam twisted, using the man's weight against him, flipping him over. The man landed on the concrete with a sickening thud. 3 down. Derek was frozen in place. His crew beaten in seconds. Liam turned to face him. You still think you run this place? Derek's face twisted with rage, humiliation, and something else. Fear. But before anything else could happen, sirens split the night air. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the parking lot. And just like that, everything changed. Derek's crew tried to run, but it was too late. The cops were already there, already watching. And Liam, he didn't move. Not when the officers stepped out. Not when one of them grabbed his arm. Not when the cold metal of handcuffs snapped around his wrists. You're under arrest. Liam barely flinched, because this wasn't a surprise. Not here, not in Fairview. The officers barely glanced at Derek and his men, but they all had their eyes on Liam. Derek smirked. Guess you're not so tough now, huh? Liam looked at him, his dark eyes unreadable, but deep inside something burned. Because he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The moment Liam Carter was shoved into the back seat of the Fairview Police Department's squad car, he knew the fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. Derek Coleman stood in the dim glow of the flashing red and blue lights, watching with a smug grin as Liam was driven away. He didn't win the fight, but he won the war. At least, that's what he thought. But Liam knew better. He could feel it. This wasn't just about a schoolyard grudge anymore. This was bigger. The system wasn't just letting Derek get away with it. It was protecting him. At the Fairview police station, Liam was processed like a criminal, fingerprinted, photographed, his mugshot taken. Despite being the one attacked, the report painted him as the aggressor. Ryan Brooks had serious injuries. Derek was a frightened student, just trying to defend himself. Liam Carter was labeled as violent and a danger to the school. The officer handling the paperwork, Sergeant Howard Langston, didn't even bother hiding his disdain. Kids like you always think you can get away with it, he muttered as he tossed Liam's file onto his desk. Liam didn't react, didn't give them what they wanted, but his fists clenched behind his back. Because he knew that name, Langston. And suddenly, everything made sense. Howard Langston wasn't just any cop. He was the uncle of Derek Coleman. And more importantly, he was the chief of police's right-hand man. He had been in Fairview long enough to know exactly how things worked, and he made sure things stayed that way. It didn't matter that Liam was innocent. It didn't matter that Derek had started the fight. The rules were never meant to be fair. And now, Liam was about to be made an example of. Hours passed before Liam's mother, Evelyn Carter, arrived at the station. She stormed in, her presence commanding the room. Evelyn wasn't just any mother. She had fought battles long before Liam was even born. But when she demanded to see her son, Sergeant Langston just smirked. Charges are being filed, he said smugly. Your son's not going anywhere. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. You're holding a minor without a lawyer? I hope you like lawsuits, Langston. Langston leaned forward. Lady, this is Fairview. No lawyer in town is taking this case. Not against Derek Coleman. Evelyn froze. And that's when Liam realized the truth. This wasn't just Derek's fight anymore. This was his family's fight. And Fairview wasn't going to let a black kid walk away clean. Fairview was a town of power and privilege, where certain families controlled everything, from the police department to the school board to the courts themselves. And at the center of it all, Mayor Victor Langston, Howard Langston's older brother and Derek Coleman's godfather. He wasn't just protecting Derek. He was ensuring Liam Carter's life was ruined. Liam wasn't just another student. He was a disruption, a threat to the status quo. And Fairview didn't like change. Later that night, Liam sat in the holding cell, his mind racing through every possible scenario. He could fight this legally, but how? Fairview's courts, police, and even the local media were all in Langston's pocket. That's when the door opened, and Howard Langston walked in. He pulled up a chair, sat down, and smirked. "You're in a bad spot, Carter." Liam didn't say a word. Langston leaned forward. "Now, I know you're a smart kid, smart enough to see how things work around here." He tapped his fingers against the table. "You got two options. You fight this, and I guarantee you lose. Maybe we find some extra charges to throw in there, resisting arrest, aggravated assault. I'm sure the DA would love to make an example out of you." He tilted his head. "Or you play ball, you keep your mouth shut, take a suspension, and leave Ridgewood quietly." Liam stared at him, his expression unreadable. Langston smiled. "You leave, we drop the charges. You stay, you get buried." Liam exhaled slowly, and then he laughed. Langston's smirk faltered. Liam leaned forward, locking eyes with the man who thought he could break him. "I've been fighting my whole life," Liam said, his voice quiet, steady. "And you think this is what's going to stop me?" Langston's jaw clenched. Liam smirked. "You're scared," he continued. "Scared that people like me won't just roll over and take it anymore." Langston stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Carter." Liam didn't blink. "I'm not the one making mistakes." By the next morning, the entire town was talking. Liam Carter's arrest was front-page news, his mugshot plastered across every screen. But something unexpected happened. The people fought back. Students at Ridgewood High protested, demanding Liam's release. Parents started questioning the school board, wondering why Derek Coleman was still in class while Liam sat in a cell. A lawyer from Atlanta reached out, offering to take Liam's case for free. And Mayor Langston? He realized something too late. Liam Carter wasn't just some kid they could sweep under the rug. He was a symbol. A reckoning was coming to Fairview, and Liam was leading it. The Fairview courtroom was silent as Liam Carter stood at the defense table, his mother seated beside him, her hands clenched together in quiet determination. The room was packed, students, teachers, concerned parents, and even reporters who had caught wind of the scandal that was unraveling in this small town. At the prosecution's table, Mayor Victor Langston sat with his arms crossed, his eyes cold and calculating. He had spent years building an empire of power in Fairview, and he wasn't about to let some black teenager bring it all crashing down. But that's exactly what was about to happen. Liam's lawyer, Kenneth Monroe, was one of the best civil rights attorneys in the state. He had taken the case pro bono, believing that Liam's fight was bigger than just one student. It was about exposing a broken system. Monroe turned toward the jury. "This case isn't just about a fight in a school parking lot," he said, his voice commanding. "This case is about a town that has allowed power to be abused, justice to be twisted, and young black men like Liam Carter to be treated as criminals simply for standing their ground." He gestured toward the defense's table. Liam Carter was targeted, not because he broke the law, but because he dared to exist in a system designed to break him. The prosecutor scoffed. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. The fact remains." But before he could finish, the doors of the courtroom swung open, and in walked Mr. Harrison, holding a USB drive. Harrison approached the judge. "Your Honor, I have new evidence that the prosecution conveniently left out." The judge raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Proceed." Harrison inserted the USB drive into the court's computer. The screen at the front of the room flickered to life. Security footage from Ridgewood High appeared. The first clip showed Derek Coleman and his crew following Liam out of school that evening, smirking, whispering, planning the ambush. The next clip showed the attack itself, Derek's men throwing the first punch, not Liam. And then, most damning of all, a police body cam recording from the night of the arrest. Langston's face turned pale, because in that recording, his brother, Sergeant Howard Langston, could be heard ordering officers to ignore witness statements that proved Liam's innocence. The courtroom erupted. It didn't take long after that. Liam was acquitted. Derek Coleman was expelled from Ridgewood High. Sergeant Langston was fired, then arrested for obstruction of justice. Mayor Victor Langston? Under pressure from state investigators, he resigned in disgrace. Fairview was forever changed. Days later, Liam stood outside Ridgewood High, looking at the place that had almost destroyed him. But now he had won. Students walked past him, some nodding in silent respect, others coming up to shake his hand. Rachel Whitmore approached, her eyes filled with something between admiration and relief. "You did it," she said. Liam shook his head. "We did it." Because this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every kid who came after him, who wouldn't have to face what he did. As he walked toward the entrance, Mr. Harrison stood by the door waiting for him. "You coming to class, Carter?" the teacher asked with a grin. Liam smiled. For the first time in a long time, he finally felt free. Liam Carter's journey is more than just a story about fighting back against bullies. It's a powerful reflection of the struggles that many people face when standing up against injustice. His story reveals the harsh reality that sometimes the systems that are meant to protect us are the same ones that try to silence us. But it also proves something even more important: courage, resilience, and the truth will always prevail, no matter how powerful the opposition may seem. One of the biggest lessons from Liam's story is that real strength isn't just about knowing how to fight. It's about knowing when to fight and why. Liam never sought out a conflict, but when he was forced into it, he refused to back down. Instead of reacting with uncontrolled aggression, he used discipline, strategy, and self-control, traits that had been instilled in him by his father. This highlights an important message. Strength is not about brute force. It's about having the wisdom to stand firm without being reckless. Another powerful takeaway from the story is that corruption thrives when good people remain silent. Fairview was a town where power was abused, where people like Derek Coleman could get away with anything simply because they had the right connections. If Liam had chosen to accept defeat, if he had let fear dictate his actions, the corruption in Fairview would have continued unchecked. But because he chose to fight, not just with his fists, but with the truth, he exposed a system that had operated in the shadows for far too long. His actions remind us that change only happens when people are brave enough to challenge injustice, no matter the odds against them. Liam's story also teaches us that resistance against injustice isn't just an individual battle. It requires a community. While Liam was strong on his own, he didn't win this fight alone. His mother, Mr. Harrison, Rachel Whitmore, and even the students who supported him played a crucial role in ensuring that the truth came out. This shows that when people come together to demand justice, even the most deeply rooted corruption can be overturned. Most importantly, Liam's story reminds us that justice isn't always immediate, but it is always worth fighting for. Throughout his journey, he faced unfair treatment, racial discrimination, and a legal system that tried to destroy him. But he never let that define him. Instead, he stood his ground and forced those in power to face the truth. And in the end, justice was served, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been silenced by the same corrupt system. At its core, Liam Carter's story is a reminder of the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the undeniable truth that even in the darkest moments, justice can prevail if we have the courage to fight for it.